In the previous section, we aimed to display Hello World heading onto the web page. Firstly, I have mentioned if you want to do it in HTML, then this is how we would do it. Inside body tag of HTML doc, we create a h1 tag with inner text to be Hello World. Then we have seen how we can achieve the same with React using React.createElement call. In this section, we are going to look at an alternate and better syntax to create React elements, that is JSX, JavaScript syntax extension, which will replace the need of using createElement method. Okay, essentially over here, React.createElement is going to trigger creation of DOM element of type h1 with no attributes and children or inner HTML as hello world text. Same thing our HTML code also does here. It tells browser to create a DOM element of type h1 with no attributes and inner HTML as hello world text, and browser renders that onto our screen. But HTML style is much more expressive, concise and declarative. Using HTML markup syntax, we just tell browser that this is what I want to achieve and let browser do the rest. Perfect example for a declarative style of coding, right? Okay, can we also reciprocate the same in our React application? Rather than writing this bulky line of code to create a React element, can we write it in much simpler and declarative way just like our HTML? Yes, it is made possible through JSX. It's a JavaScript syntax extension which lets us use HTML-like syntax inside our JavaScript code, which helps us to create React elements that eventually produces DOM nodes on the web page. I'm gonna go ahead and use JSX to create our h1 React element with children or content as hello world text. Let's comment out our React.createElement code over here. I'm gonna define the app variable again, but this time assigning it to some JSX code. h1 with content hello world. That's all. This is how I can produce the same UI as of before using JSX code. Let's just save it and head over to our browser to see the output. And there we go. We got the same output, hello world on the web page. See how remarkably similar it is to our HTML code on the top. Only difference being JSX produces React elements that will eventually get rendered on our web page as DOM nodes, whereas HTML creates DOM nodes directly on the web page. Looking at this code, you may get a question, is this a valid piece of JavaScript code at first? The answer is no. It's just JSX code. It's not the proper JavaScript code that our browser can understand and parse. That's why at the time of compilation, our build process replaces this JSX code with React.createElement calls, which is a valid JavaScript and our browser can understand. To prove this, let's head over to the browser and go inside Sources tab on the console. And let's take a look at bundle.js file over here. Bundle.js, as the name suggests, it's a single JavaScript file served to the browser that includes all the code inside every JavaScript file that we have written, as well as the packages we have used. So let's search for hello string over here. So I'm gonna press Command F on my Mac and search for hello. We can clearly see here our app variable is assigned with React.createElement call with the appropriate arguments passed to it, even though in our code we initialized app with JSX code. So this code h1 hello world gets transpiled to above line, that is React.createElement call, before it's being sent to the browser. So JSX is really a shorthand way to create React elements or user interfaces in much more expressive, declarative and concise way. Remember, we discussed earlier that there are more things that Create React app will do for us. Another thing that it does for us is it sets up Babel configuration to transpile JSX to JavaScript, or precisely React.createElement calls. Babel is the best compiler or transpiler that converts future versions or future features of JavaScript code to current version that is well supported by most of the browsers. As well as it also transpiles non-JavaScript syntax like JSX to JavaScript code. Some people don't really like JSX at the beginning, and it might look like from outside that why are we putting HTML inside our JavaScript code and breaking the separation of concerns principle. But we really need to understand that this is not HTML over here. As well, I don't really like the phrasing of the question, putting HTML inside JavaScript. It is definitely not HTML. In my opinion, right question would be, why are we putting view and logic together? And surely we are going to discuss how we can solve this separation of concerns problem later when we understand presentational and container components. For now, keep in mind, JSX is not HTML and you can just think of it as a concise way for writing React.createElement in a more expressive and declarative way like HTML. It's much more readable and maintainable for people working with React as the code looks cleaner and understandable. We can get accustomed to writing JSX very quickly as it resembles a lot with HTML and we are already familiar with HTML syntax. It's a fact that we understand familiar code much more easily than the new syntax. JSX is not compulsory and you can perfectly write your React application using React.createElement method also. But trust me, once you start writing JSX, you would never want to go back to writing React.createElement again. Okay, throughout this course, we are going to use JSX syntax in our code rather than React.createElement calls. In the next section, we are going to look at slightly less trivial example on JSX. Alright, let's continue understanding JSX.